To introduce probably a man who doesn't need any introduction. So it's one of the things I've done well. Jack Whitehead, who is going to be talking on education of global citizens and living theory, which Jack is very well known for. So thank you very much.
Well, many thanks for coming. It's a particular pleasure because just as the university is celebrating its 50 years, as the university was being established, I was reading Eric Fromm on my initial teacher education course at the University of Newcastle. So it's a delight for me, to come. I'm just curious about, very quickly, just for a few minutes, if you were just to say anything that you want to about, if you've got any questions or issues that you feel that you would like to see addressed in the next 40 minutes, could you just tell me what they are? Because it's always a pleasure in this sense of a dialogical pedagogy to engage with other participants, literally within a conversation. So do you have anything that you've actually come with that you're interested in, or you've got questions or issues that you want to make sure are addressed? Because I can't talk at you, but I prefer to have much better data. Yeah.
I'm quite interested in whether you think, there's an extent to which universities also have a duty to educate for intercultural understanding, or whether that stops at 18 with schools. So that's what I'm interested in, really.
Yeah. Any others? Yeah. No? Yeah. Yes.
Well, I have a question that arose in my head when I was writing a paper about global citizenship education. It's how doable it is in such political dilemmas around us. Like how doable it is. Like you can do it at school, but how applicable in real life.
Yeah, and I'll bring into the room,
So
through this medium, if you look at it like a virtual window, and I'll be able to bring into the room the presences of people from all over the world that have actually made their masters and doctorates available, but who are living citizens. So you'll be able to see in different continents, different parts of the world, that it is not only doable, but we've got the evidence of people actually researching, and they made their accounts freely available for us. And you use this literally as a virtual portal. I'll show you how to access everything. Yeah. Any others that you're feeling you'd like?
I'm quite interested in how we filter or we kind of select living theory research.
Yeah.
Because it is a very complex thing, teaching. And then once you've got the layers of research on, then if you introduce research into your teaching, actual research, there's a lot of complexity there. So how can we filter things to make things effective and to make sure we don't have the wrong...
I'd love to address that, because so much of the selection comes down to what we call your ontological values. What are the values that give meaning and purpose to your life that you give explanatory power to? And how do you then select, for example, from theories that you've heard here with the keynotes, that you've heard keynotes from what I would say everybody from a discipline perspective, usually social science. But in my understanding of educational research, I've yet to hear educational research, which is actually focused on what it is that I think you are interested in. So let me come back to that, because it's, again, crucial. Any other questions or interests that you've got? So,
I was just thinking about the title of your presentation notes. I'm really interested to see how you see the meaning of global citizens and globalization. In what sense do you mean that? Like going back to the definition of your definition of what a global citizen is.
Well, if I start with that, because I think it's really important, is that you heard Hugh. And Hugh was actually coming to it from, as a sociologist in relation to political economy. Right? So Hugh's research into, for example, the high skills economy. And it's lovely to see the transformation in Hugh in terms of the data and the evidence, because he's now questioning his earlier stance in terms of high skills economy, its influence. Now, if you take a view of globalization, grounded in what is known as economic rationalism, which is one of the major understandings of globalization, one of the keynotes in Australia in 1992, it was the Second World Congress on Actual Learning Research, Robin McTaggart really hit at economic rationality as leading to what he called demoralization and devaluation. So if you just have economic rationality driving globalization, it can lead to taking values out of the equation because the monetary value is the dominant one. That can itself lead to demoralization because you lose the connection with the values that you use to give meaning and purpose to your life. So that is one notion of globalization grounded in economic rationality. Now, the one that I work with as an alternative globalization doesn't deny the importance of economics we all need to earn our living. But at its heart, there is this phrase that I'd like to come back to. But it is about the values that carry hope for the flourishing of humanity. If you just hold on to that, because when you mentioned Eric Fromm, the whole of Eric Fromm's writings are actually focusing, thank the art of loving, the revolution of hope, the sane society, to have it to be, fear of freedom. The man for himself, one of his first ones, always focus on these questions about what is it, and he wanted to develop a humanizing ethics, a psychology. What is it about these values that actually might have some quality which actually helps the flourishing of humanity? You know, I hope that as I'm with you now, that I'm actually expressing ontological values that energize. I hope you can feel this. It's not just words I'm using, but you evoke in me. You actually, because you're here and you're educators, I'm excited to be with you, and you evoke this passion and this desire, and I love what I do. Now, that is what I'm focusing on with an alternative globalization. And I'll draw on researchers from India, from America, from Canada, from Australia, to try to show you how people have been researching with this notion of an alternative globalization in creating their living theories. And all that I mean by a living theory, you can all produce your own from this room. And they are the explanations that you produce for your educational influence in your own learning, in the learning of others, and in the learning of the social formations that influence your practice and understandings. That's an idea that I first put forward in about 1985. I developed it in 1989 in the publications. But it was to put it as an alternative view of theory to, for example, the ones that Paul put forward in his keynote, that Hughes just put forward, Alma did. And you can trace, if you like, the logic and the frameworks back, if you like, to disciplines. Okay, so let me just pause and say, is there anything else that you'd like me to respond to in terms of the inquiries before I just show you what I've actually brought for you that hopefully you'll access? I'll have the PowerPoints, they'll all be on my website, there's a paper going with it. And if you want to get back to me, the email's there as well. But before I do that, is there anything else that you're feeling that you'd like me to really focus on? Okay? Don't hesitate to come in and say, look, I'd like you to take this out. Because that thing about the complexity, I'd just like to explain how simple, how very simple, the starting point to generate your own living theory is. Now, mine started literally 50 years ago, 4th of September, 1967. The first lesson I taught in the East End of London, Langdon Park School, and I was a science teacher. It was a disaster. I'd never met kids like this before. It was a kind of middle-class background, coming to Tower Hamlets, absolutely right. I came out of that lesson and I thought, God, I've got to do this better. I was in a real state when I went home that night. And my question was, right, how do I do this better? I've got to improve this. Now, it was as simple as that, and that question stayed with me. So, how do I do what I'm doing better? How do I improve what I'm doing? Now, that notion of improvement, grounded in my values, helped me then to select what I then brought in, because I then went to study at the Institute of Education, and it was over 4 years part-time study, because I've met Peter's work on my initial teacher education course called Ethics and Education. So I went to study with them, Peters and Hurst and Pat White, and they brought my understanding of philosophy to quite a high point over 2 years. I then went on to the Masters in Psychology because I wanted to know how to do things better. So my selection, and I loved some of Piaget's work, it helped me enormously, although you wouldn't accept the whole theory today, but his notion of concrete reasoning helped me with the teaching of science enormously. So I select what appears to me to help me to answer my question, how do I improve what I'm doing? But in the process of doing that, I'm researching the inquiry. So I'm bringing that knowledge into the public forum, like Lawrence Stenhouse said. It's systematic inquiry made public. And I build in validation groups based on the work of Habermas, where he says, look, ask 4 questions in understanding each other. What improves the comprehensibility of what you're saying? How do you strengthen the evidence base of your assertions? How do you actually account, and he called it the normative background, which is basically the socio-historical and socio-cultural background that influences what you do. And his last one was fascinating because he said, how do you enhance the authenticity of your account? Which is really, can you show that you're living your values as fully as possible? So that question there is really important. And each of the doctoral theses, I'll show you how to access, draw in different insights. You know, we've got Buddhist, I've got Hindu, I've got Catholics, I've got Protestant, coming from different spiritual backgrounds. But each one of them select what matters to them in improving their practice. Now again, I want to pause just to give you just the opportunity. If there's anything that you're feeling right, I'd like to follow this up. You know, please do, because I'm going to show you how you can access quite a lot of this work, and I hope you will do. Anything? Shell-shocked? Yeah?
Doesn't the very notion of improving presuppose some sort of theory and aims and purposes?
Oh, absolutely. It implies purpose, but not necessarily measurement. There is a problem with scale and data. That if you're faced with quantitative research, where the data is ordinal or ratio, I don't know if you know this difference between nominal, ordinal, ratio and data. To measure something like a ruler, it really has got to be interval or ratio. When I'm talking about my values of love, compassion, freedom, justice, those are not the kinds of qualities that I can put onto a categorization which can be ordered and then intervals between the scales. You can use that for many things in building technology, but not within making judgments about how you're living your educational values in practice. Okay, so in terms of purpose, absolutely vital. You know, I couldn't do what I do without that ontological passion. You know, it's like with Fromm, you know, you make a decision, you unite with the world in the spontaneity of love and productive work, or actually you seek a kind of security that destroys your integrity. And it's very difficult. I often go between the two. But that sense of purpose, Peter's, in his philosophy, he said, look, if you examine the question, what ought I to do? Right? Now, his philosophy was mistaken because it was grounded in what was called Kantian transcendental deduction. But he had 5 fundamental principles that he came up with for any rational person asking what ought I to do. And it was focused on freedom and justice, consideration of interests, respect for persons, and also democratic procedures. So that's a fundamental question which all of my doctoral students, and I've got 32 successfully completed doctoral students between 96 and 2012 on the web volume, and the students have made those freely available. So that sense of purpose, you'll see there are different purposes that people have all explicated in their own way, their values that give meaning and purpose. And those are explanatory principles. Am I making sense here? That you can all explain your lives very differently, but your constellation of values and what you do make you the unique person you are. Does that make, am I okay? Yeah? Are you okay? Don't hesitate, because as I say, the dialogue is really important. And I do try to live it. I mean, that's why the video is on, because I use a lot of visual data. So even now, I hope you are energizing me simply by being present with you. And the love that I have for what I do is coming out. And I just want to mention this because on my email signature, and this is why I asked you the question I did, because the chief technician here is on the photograph board. He was called Martin Dobson. And he died in his 40s. And he was a remarkable person. I saw him 2 days before he died, and the last thing he said to me is, mate, it's created such embarrassment in my life. He said, Jack, give my love to the department, right? Give my love to the department. So my signature now is always Love Jack, and I try to explain why I'm signing off to the Vice-Chancellor, Love Jack. They're not used to it. But I keep that going because Martin brought what I call a loving warmth of humanity into the department. He was remarkable. He was ill for some time, but he always had that warmth of humanity which actually moves me. Yeah? So again, I try to bring that into my explanation of what I'm doing. But let me just show you how you can access through this media now, because often if you show PowerPoint, it's just to communicate in text to you, so it comes through there. I use this in a very different way. I was over in Cartagena in Colombia 3 weeks ago, and I was able to show these doctoral theses to the audience, but to show them that this is a virtual window, that the people here that have made, there are, I think it's about 45, maybe 50 doctoral theses, 32 of them, as I say, I supervised to completion, but there are now living theory doctoral theses that are all the way around the world that are being legitimated by different universities. And many of them have just said, look, Jack, you can put this on your website, it's freely available to people, and this is what you've got access to. So you ask that sense about global citizens. If you look at this person who has put from this one here, Sajurin Kotoshi, Creating Living Educational Theory, a journal towards transformative teacher education in Pakistan. He got that living theory doctorate legitimated at the University of Kathmandu in Nepal. And that was only about 18 months ago. It's a beautiful story of his narrative. He was a head teacher. He actually comes from an Islamic perspective. It's non-proselytizing, so you feel invited into what he calls a soulful inquiry. And this text demonstrates the imposition of a curriculum in Pakistan which he resisted. And he puts forward a very different view of what a curriculum could look like. Now, you've got all of these. As I say, Elizabeth Wolverard here. I didn't have anything to do with these supervisions here. So other people have taken up the idea of a living theory, and they've actually supervised a successful completion. This is a lovely one from South Africa, from the University of Pretoria, and that's in public health, a living theory of teaching undergraduate medical students. Now, I only want to just point to one or two. Again, I had nothing to do with this supervision, but here's a really interesting one from Durban University of Technology. Again, how I use my living and lived experience to influence creating economic independence. She was working with black women, poor black women in a Zulu-dominated area who needed to gain some economic independence. So she actually worked using a living theory approach to actually support them. Now, if you look, and I want to just emphasize this, I've got my own PhD in there as well, but if you look at this here, how am I, okay? Now, when I came here to the university, nobody would permit I to appear in a research question. Universities around the country would reject a research proposal with I in the research question, right? Now, if you look at many of these, they've actually been accepted in universities around the world with I. This is from Australia, University. How am I generating? How do I evolve? How can I reconceptualize the living I? Now, the other thing I brought into educational research was if you ask the question, how do I improve my practice? Your I can exist as a living contradiction. Now, in logic, there was a 2,500-year battle between the Aristotelian logic, which eliminated contradiction, and the Platonic, which in terms of dialogue, seemed to accept contradiction. Am I making sense here? So what I brought in, and how do I improve what I'm doing, the I could exist as a living contradiction, and I showed this myself using video. I thought about inquiry learning going in my science classrooms. The videos showed that I was giving the kids the questions, however subtly, and that was a real shock to me. It wasn't hypocrisy, you know. I really felt I've got inquiry learning going. Now, the video helped me to see that I was a living contradiction. So I tried to bring that into the research. And now you find that it is quite common. There's still some resistance in some places that you can't put I as a living contradiction within your research accounts. But you can bring your embodied knowledge with all that depth and extent that you've got in this room. You can actually bring that into the academy for legitimation for your higher degrees. Now, in one sense, when Paul gave his keynote, you've got Alma hers, you've got Hugh giving his. That is not a focus of those inquiries. Am I making, again, sense here? You've really got to be prepared to have the courage to say, no, my embodied knowledge, the knowledge I express, is worthy of a doctorate or a master's. And what I'm going to do is make that public and evolve it as I inquire. And I think that links to what Paul was really interested in terms of the pedagogies. But I'll now say, because I'm giving you that, you can get into actionresearch.net with all of this resource. You can actually get me through the email, which is on that Action Research website. And next week you'll have the PowerPoint and the paper that goes with this presentation. But I really do want to thank you, because I'll end with just this. That, I mean, my thanks to you in this, what you've allowed me to do, basically, is this. Usually I ask the I questions in my presentations. But this, I thought, well, I'll be quite self-indulgent, you know, because it is a 50th celebration. And I just wanted to bring you a living legacy that I think I've left in the School of Education here, that is in the library, because I worked here from 73 to 2012. And I'm now a visiting professor at the University of Cumbria. So it was just that feeling of what you've allowed me to do is just to bring this work, which I think is a living legacy, into this space. So thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
Questions?
You can all go.
Jack, I've got so many questions, I don't know. In terms of personal ontology, I mean, to start with PhDs, how would you understand someone's PhD as an I? I mean, at what level would you say they're a PhD versus an MA versus a BA?
The criteria are actually very simple. I'm examining one next week. And each university just sends you the criteria, and usually for PhD it's this. Is this an original contribution to knowledge? Has the student engaged with the literature in a critical way, and again is appropriate to a doctorate? Yeah? So your judgment as a judge, they come back to your professional experience as a judge, but that original contribution is what distinguishes the masters, which can be a contribution to knowledge, but it need not be the original contribution to knowledge. And then there are small things about, an important one is about matter worthy of publication, but it need not be in a form ready for publication. So you haven't got many criteria that you actually need to use in judging a living theory doctorate. They're the same as a normal doctorate. But with the I research, you always insist that it is engaged in a social context. So it can never be an autonomous and independent I. That the I is actually a relational I, which is being influenced by the social context. That's why that selection of ideas, like Hugh's, for example, you know, you can bring in that whole thing about high skills economy and how that's influencing your context. And Hugh's changed his mind dramatically with the evidence. So that's where the I, you know, the criteria, are very simple indeed. And they usually come down to 3 or 4 criteria that you actually apply. And that's how I got this. But the only reason all of these 32 went through is that I got a range, sometimes only 2 examiners were needed. The university did not have to agree with, I just needed 2 internationally recognised examiners that could examine those doctorates. And that's all you need to worry about. Not whether your supervisor, not whether the department won't accept this knowledge. It's whether the external examiner, usually, is somebody who actually knows the field and actually recognises it as an original contribution. Anything else? Or?
When you're working in practice,
Yeah.
as opposed to working in my research,
Yeah.
everything's much more collaborative, isn't it? And the big question is how do we make things happen? And that's where I was asking about the selection and filter.
Well,
because educational context and practice is about collaborative working in teams. And I know you said about relational, it's part of it.
You go for, if you like, what I call a relational ontology. And Barbara Thayer Baker brings in a feminist epistemology as a relational ontology. Now, the difficulty with we is, it's actually Martin Buber denied the we relationship because it actually destroys the I. And you've got to be very careful. If I was to use we in our context, you would be absolutely right, I think, to challenge me because I haven't checked with any of you that I have the right to use we. Now, that relationship between the I and the we is very, very important. And you bring it in and you'll see a lot of the accounts recognise the collaborative nature of what is being done, but also the relational dynamic that helps the individual to construct their own I, not as an independent one, but in relation with others, and not to lose that sense of integrity. So that's a really crucial, in fact, Marie Huxtable put forward that notion of I, we, I. So you've got an I and then a tilde, we, and then tilde I. So it shows the dynamic, and that's in her doctorate. So I think that's a really crucial point to bring into these living theory theses, that they are relational, they are cooperative, but at the same time, you want that individual integrity, not autonomy, but integrity in terms of what you're doing. Yeah. Any others?
An original contribution to knowledge, does that presuppose a particular epistemology, or does the thesis create its own epistemology, and doesn't the examiner then have to be tremendously sensitive to that?
Yeah, the examiners do, because in a living theory thesis, you need to understand that each one of you have got what I call your own living logic. Now, a logic, understood by Marcuse, was it is a mode of thought that is appropriate for comprehending the real as rational. There are totally different ways of understanding what is rational. So for the living theory logics, the individual has got to put the constellation of values within the explanation that literally makes sense to the examiner, and that making sense is part of the logic. So you're absolutely right that the examiners of these theses actually do need to have that awareness. They're not dealing with a propositional logic, although that comes into it. They're not dealing with a dialectical logic. They're actually trying to stay with your living logic that's actually informed your lives and the way it makes sense of your lives, and your, in particular, the explanation of your influence. So that idea of the living logic, I've got a few papers on that I presented at BERA, you can get from my website, but it's such a crucial question, that. Yeah. Is that okay? But that living logic is really vital, and that sensitivity to how is this meaning being made. And because I just want, in South Africa, if you get on the inside of Ubuntu as a way of being, it's a very different sense than actually if you're in our society trying to make sense of relationships and collaboration. If you're in Japan, the way in which the collective works, I just could not make an individual decision in Japan. There was no way. That the group was so powerful, it was fascinating for me to experience it. And again in China, the sense of energy that the Chinese have, going back to an ancient notion which we call qi, I mean, it moves them in terms of bringing as an explanatory principle, which I now try to do. I hope you can feel my energy. I do relate to that Chinese notion of qi because it is a life-enhancing energy. But the different cultures, and that's why this idea of the intercultural understanding, what we've had international mindfulness, we've heard a lot of, each of those is really important, and that's why that notion of being a global citizen, and I think we're all connected, is also something that you might also like to think in terms of your own lives, and if you're explaining your influence, do you bring in any kind of global insights about these different cultures that you're actually trying to influence or them influence you. Okay, yes.
Eric Fromm was quoted by Hughes saying people were afraid of loneliness, and the I seems quite a lonely position to understand the world from.
Supposing that I say, okay, I'm going to work with you, and I'm fascinated by your practice, and I'm genuinely interested, as I was with Ormond, to bring your embodied knowledge into the public domain. You know, so over 5 years, that's a minimum of those part-time PhDs. Everybody did 5 years of study. Now, there was no loneliness involved in that, in the sense that we had a community around us where people were genuinely interested in the uniqueness of the I and the productive life that, if you like, each person is living. Now, Eric Fromm, although Hugh picked up that thing of loneliness, actually, if you read The Fear of Freedom, The Sane Society, you get an enormous energy. You know, it's not a lonely book. It's not about aloneness. You know, it's art of loving, to have it to be. The Sane Society is all about coming together with small groups to face up to social difficulties. Yeah? So I think you'd find that working in this community, we have Skypes every Sunday, you know, 3 groups, different groups, all different places of the world coming together, which actually energise me because it's a community. So I don't think the isolation, in terms of this kind of community, is a serious problem.
I did a part-time PhD and it was quite lonely.
Yeah, so this, in terms of the part-time PhD, but we had the groups. You know, at one point, I've noticed a lot, I was supervising 16 doctorates, and it meant that we had a community, and so I could spend almost all my time supervising. So we had a community. Well, you'll see that 32 actually completed. And I think that was the high success rate of any lecturer at that time. And partially it was due to the support each other gave to each other. Because it really was not a lonely... but I know what you mean, it can be. I think you've done extremely well if you've managed that yet.
Jack, why don't you say a bit about how you actually enable people to have that connection? Because sometimes it's not... You find the most problems in the person who's sitting next to you, and you find somebody the other side of the world who's part of your community, so you're not alone. So
yeah, we must back in. I think we must finish. But are we okay?
Yeah.
So it was if you take 19, it would be 1984. Gosh, and I took my first group of MPhil students. Okay, so about 6 of them. The Bureau have never seen anything like it, because there were MPhil students coming to present, and everybody had written their papers beforehand. It was all in a booklet, and it was a kind of they were not feeling alone, but there was that sense of energy that they've got something significant to say. Bureau knows in the sense that these people were coming confident that their embodied knowledge as teachers was definitely coming into the Education and Research Association. So that sense of community has always been part of it. And, you know, I could actually just show you this, because if you go into my webpage, so it's theactionresearch.net, that gets you into all the doctorates. But if you can get into the homepage of the educational journal, Living Theories, but if you go into this one, that Marie was very influential in bringing, I brought this one into Cartagena 3 weeks ago. Now, each one of these, when you think about communities, that you've got here, this is our Skype Living Theory support group. You know, we can have 7 or 8 on at the same time. Each one of those takes you to their papers, their accounts of what they've been doing. But it's not, you can actually get into these, as I say, very quickly. The eJobs community, with the Living Theory, you get a sense of people underneath it. When you click on these, you get what each person is doing. This is a teacher from India that's working with a former Miss India called Swarup Rawal, who's doing tremendous work at the moment in what they call the tribal areas of northeast India. And Swarup, in terms of being a global citizen, I think you'll just be bowled over by what she's doing. She's getting an honorary D.Lit at the University of Worcester in October, and I videotaped her last week. I've got her URL on my PowerPoint slides, and I think as a national global citizen, you'll find that a lot of the people here, he introduced me to the idea, Mark Potts, his doctorate at Aspire University, he introduced me to the idea of living global citizenship. We've got to look out together on it. But this, in terms of community, I hope you can just get a sense of the people that continue to meet, they come together. The Irish group, oh, this is an amazing group of women. There are 5 of them. And 4 here, can you see, Bernie Sullivan, Catriona, Mary, Marion, and a New Zealand researcher, Bruce Ferguson, who's just recently come back to New Zealand. But if you click on here, these 4 women, they've all got their living theory theses accepted by Limerick University 10 years ago. And Limerick had never actually validated and accredited the I question. And each one of them had got living theory in the title. So if you do get into, and they've now created the network of educational action research in Ireland with that base that they've now got of their living theory doctrines. But it's just that feeling that around the world there are now global communities that can actually provide this kind of support. But they've all brought their knowledge, their individual, how do I explain my educational influence in my own learning of others, and the learning of social formations in this forum. So it's like that virtual window, you can access it. So into this room, flowing into this room are all of these contributions. And you could do the same. You could then have it going the other way, with your explanations of influence, educational influence, with your values, going the other way and sharing that within these communities. Yeah.
Are there, with all these PhD theses and all these specific contexts, overarching values?
Well, the overarching values, they've just been explored here. And again, if you go into my website and you go down this here, which is called the What's New section. Now, 3 weeks ago, you'll just see, well, it was the 12th of June, about 3 weeks ago. If you go into here, this was the workshop I did in Cartagena about living theory research, ecology of knowledges, and this is the global assembly, the first global assembly for what's called knowledge democracy. And it was part of the Action Research Network of the Americas. So you've got this global movement now that are trying to bring together researchers to offer their accounts of their educational influences as part of a global movement. So my workshop was on living theory research. The paper I gave was as a social movement. So that question, if you get into there, you get into all the details of this first global assembly. There was my workshop, living theory research and ecology of knowledges. There is a forum that you can get into and you can participate. It's called the Lumio. It's a new form of application, and people like yourselves are encouraged to participate now in this global assembly, so you can feel part of that global movement. But the guy who gave the keynote, it will be quite fascinating because he's called De Souza Santos, Bonaventure De Souza Santos. He's a professor of sociology. But one of his texts I reviewed in Egypt was about epistemologies of the South, and it's a strange name, justice against epistemicide, right? Now that word I've never heard of, epistemicide. But it actually means how it sounds. It's about the killing off knowledge. Yes, right. Killing off of knowledge. But it's well worth reading because it's basically saying that the Western Academy, by not basically accepting, how do I improve what I'm doing, bring the indigenous knowledge into the university, it's actually killing off really important knowledges around the world. And it's a really fascinating analysis, but that comes into what you've asked about. Is there a global movement? And you can access it, as I say, if you go into there, you'll get all the details of it. Okay? Thank you very much.
Jeff has spoken. Thank you, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Unfortunately, as was announced this morning, the next presentation in this room has been cancelled.